Hey, so this week I'm going to change. I'm sticking with the assignments for 804, but I want you to notice that there's no reading. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the videos. They're kind of quite different. There's three of them called "Do You Speak American?" And the first one is Temple Grandin. And if you don't know about Temple Grandin, I guarantee you're going to really enjoy this quality. It's kind of an autobiography, but it's shot like a movie with Claire Danes playing Temple Grandin. And if you don't know who she is, you can look it up. But I think you'd really enjoy just watching the movie and not knowing very much about it, because the more you watch the more shocked and surprised and delighted you'll be. I will say this, my attitude about when you're engaged in what's called multiculturalism, it's ever expanding. It affects everything. We've had stuff, sexual orientation. We've had, obviously the old ethnicities and people worried about color of skin and things like this. But I want to expand it and you actually get away from the old view of multiculturalism, and you look at it as a way of expanding your view on the world. I wish I had another term for multiculturalism. Maybe I'll come up with something. But as I see culture is something that, from last week, it's something that we believe, that we do, or an activity, or something we create, something we make. And so in that sense, our perception of the world is multicultural, and it may not involve another language or someone who grows up and it develops differently than us for whatever reason, and their perception of the world is very different. And I think autism certainly qualifies as a very different way of viewing the world, and really extraordinary, that has not been explored. In a world that, for most people, if you'll see in Temple Grandin, she could have been institutionalized and just locked up. And they said, well, she can't function in our world, so we'll lock her away. We'll put her away. And in essence, we will put her away from us so we don't see her. So I like to look at disabilities and whatever we call that. I don't like to even use the term disabilities. It bothers me because I said, well, you're different. And I'll give you an example, because with limited English proficiency was often used to talk about those that come to the United States. And I work with them, and my students work with them, and they don't speak English or not very much English. People would say they have limited English proficiency. And I said, but isn't that term really apply to me? I mean, I have limited Spanish proficiency. If I had been taken at age 8 or 9 to France, I'd have had limited French proficiency. So I'm going to be limited in Chinese or some language, most languages. I'm linguistically pretty limited to this certain geographic area of the world and certain culture. Even go to Britain, and you'll see in the accents, even in the United States, you can go somewhere and you really don't speak quite like everybody else in that area. That's why I kind of paired these two up. They're a little different, but the attitude that someone who perceives things or speaks differently is somehow inferior to you is the issue here. Whether somebody, and Jeff Foxworthy and his accents, and you'll enjoy. He's in the southern one. I call it CB or trucker English. You guys, if you're younger, you may have different perceptions of it. But if you're living in an urban area, or you're living in a rural area, a ranch area, Cajun, Northwest, if you're living up in Seattle, or you live in the inner boroughs of New York City or Manhattan or Queens or Boston or Maine or Vermont, you're going to have different perceptions. You're going to have different accent. And you may find yourself not understanding certain terms. And if you move there, you're the one that's out. You're the unusual one. So just think about that for any kind of so-called lack of certain physical abilities, sight, hearing, etc., but those become known as cultures. And I like to think of them that way because it's like you're exploring a different country, only it's in a person's head instead of a geographical place with its own history. Um, so anyhow, I want you to just watch these videos and enjoy them. And then I've got the discussion. I want you to think about how you could use Temple Grandin to teach your students, because you're not going to have a class in high school called multicultural education. Probably some places wouldn't be allowed to even have that term, but you're going to have opportunities to teach about those that are different and how they perceive the world, and that could include people of so-called high abilities, gifted people, as well as people of different abilities. And some people have, they may be far better than you at mathematics and brilliant, and you're the one with the limited abilities. I just find we're playing games with words sometimes, except with accents, and those games are fun. So I want you to just enjoy this and think about it in your discussion. Try to see how you'd use Temple Grandin, and also just talk about different accents. It's really very good for discussion if you talk about the time you spent a month in North Carolina and you discovered you were the peculiar one, or you went to Tennessee, or you're in New York and you thought you spoke English and people were speaking English to you and you didn't even know it. I remember one really unusual one is a lady went to India, and that's what I mean by Indian English. I'm not talking about Native Americans. I'm talking about India. And the lady said she listened to a presentation by the teachers. And after they finished, and the lady, this expert, whatever she was, world expert, she went to the head of the university and she said, I really enjoyed listening to your local teachers, but I didn't quite understand what language were they speaking. And she said, well, they were speaking in English, because it had a different rhythm and the stresses were different. And the lady was thinking, oh, I'm listening to a foreign language. No, she was listening to English. She's kind of embarrassed about it. But English is a world language, just like Spanish and French and Chinese, world language. You don't think so? You're Chinese all over the world. And who knows what language will be the next world language. Now, right now it's English. Maybe it could be an Asian language. But the point is, I want you to enjoy this, and I want you to think about how you could use this in your teaching. So good luck.